Hello, welcome. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Children and Young People Scrutiny Commission this evening. I would also like to remind everybody present that this is a formal meeting of Hackney Council and all the constitutional requirements of council meetings apply. Please can I ask everyone to remember, whether you are in the chamber or connecting virtually, that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast via the live via the internet. The rights of the press and public to record and film this meeting apply, and everyone present should note that media representatives may be in attendance or viewing the live stream. I would like to thank everyone attending this evening and giving your time to support the work of the Scrutiny Commission. It is much appreciated. Moving on to item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Ross. I don't think we have any other apologies. Moving on then to item 2, we don't have any urgent items, so the order of business is as published in the agenda. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No. In which case, moving on to our first substantive item of the meeting, which is item 4, the Children's Centre Lessons Learned report. Hackney Education has brought forward 2 public consultations on proposals to reconfigure local children's centres. Both of these public consultations were not completed. 15th of September 2021, consultation paused to allow for further engagement and consultation, and the 31st of January 2024, a judicial review claim from parents was received in June 2024, and the council agreed to settle by consent in November 2024. A lessons learned review was commissioned by the Mayor of Hackney to reflect on factors leading to the judicial review and its outcome, and to help the council learn from the process. The lessons learned review report was published on the council website in June 2025. It was agreed that the Children's Centre lesson learned report should be presented to the Commission for consideration and review at the earliest opportunity after its publication. For this item, at the outset, the Commission wants to make clear that the objectives of this scrutiny session are: firstly, the Commission wants to create a safe and open space where respective stakeholders can reflect on lessons learned, report in a transparent and constructive manner, and secondly, through this scrutiny process, to contribute to a shared understanding on the way forward for children's centres and what those key features of any future consultation on this subject may look like. Thirdly, to understand if there are any broader lessons for consultation and engagement across the council. Scrutiny has a clear and defined role in bringing together stakeholders to assist the decision-making process of the council. This is particularly the case where the council may be required to make difficult and challenging decisions, where stakeholders may hold competing views and opinions. As a commission, we want to acknowledge the sincere and deep felt feelings of all stakeholders involved, all of whom have been involved and or impacted by the proposals to reconfigure local children's centres. It is clear that stakeholders have experienced challenging and difficult situations in connection to these proposals and the ensuing consultation over the past months and indeed years. These include the parents at local children's centres whose children and families are directly impacted by the proposals, the staff who work at local children's centres who have clearly been impacted by future role and work uncertainty around the proposed changes, and council officers and other decision makers who have been required to develop proposals and make these difficult decisions. Whilst different stakeholders will have different positions and perspectives on this issue, I believe everyone here at this meeting has a common position and purpose, which is about wanting to achieve what is best for children in Hackney. And as Chair, I would request that we all hold and respect this position for ourselves and others in all our discussions today. And with this in mind, please can I remind everyone present to refrain from naming individuals or making any accusatory or inflammatory claims, so that we can ensure that we have the most productive discussion this evening as possible. We have a large number of contributors this evening. I won't name everybody because often you've got very long titles also, so I might be here for a while, but we'll welcome you to introduce yourselves when you come in. So I will hand over now. I think we're going to first hear from Hackney Education, starting with Deputy Mayor Bramble, Councillor Sizer, and then Jackie Burke and Jason Marantz, and then we will move on to hearing from our parent group representatives who are here, and then we will move on to Q&A. So we'll have 15 minutes for Hackney Education. So over to Deputy Mayor Bramble and officers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the essence of time, can I hand over to Councillor Sizer, who's been leading on this work alongside officers? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you for the tone which you've just set. It's really appreciated. I totally agree. We are all here with the same common interests. I welcome the meeting this evening and the chance to scrutinise and learn from the work that we have done via the Lessons Learned review. And I'm really grateful to the Mayor for commissioning this review in order to ensure the best start in life for Hackney's children, which, as you just stated, is our common purpose here tonight. Hackney as a borough has a really proud history of being ambitious for the needs of all of our children, mirroring the government's own commitment to early years. But our ambition also has to be underpinned by two key concerns. Firstly, long-term sustainability, and secondly, equality of access. This means we have to adapt to changes before us, specifically falling numbers and economic pressures. And we are therefore pleased that there has been a robust analysis and now action following the review. Having now met with many of the children's centres and staff, I'm really keen to listen to all feedback and take on board their input alongside officers. Staff at our centres work consistently and do an incredible job, and we will always be immensely grateful for the work that they do. So we now find ourselves at a stage of analysing recent and ongoing data to bring in the reflections of the early year landscape, and crucially, will take a long-term lens of sustainability and equality. So there has been much work done, and there is much work to be done, always will be, but we remain really committed to ensuring the best start for Hackney's children, and so I welcome this evening's discussion and moving forwards. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Jackie Burke. I'm the Group Director for Children Education at Hackney Council. I'm not proposing to spend a lot of time going through the contents of the Lessons Learned report, but just to provide some context to this. As members and participants here know, that the Mayor commissioned this Lessons Learned report after we conceded the JR in last year, 2024. This was overseen by a Group Director and another part of the Council for Climate, Homes and Economy, so that it was completely independent of children education. In terms of when we were preparing this report, we made several visits to staff in the centres to take on board their views and their experience of the consultation. The purpose of the consultation was not to go over all of the detail of the information that was provided in the consultation. It was about how the overall consultation was run and the point at which we conceded. In terms of, again, the Lessons Learned review, we took into account very strongly the views of staff. We extended the period at which we were conducting the review to take on board what their thoughts and feelings and views were. And indeed, as soon as it was published, we went to every single centre involved to talk to them and explain what the findings of that particular review were. Those of you who are looking at the outcome and the findings of the review and the recommendations will see that these are recommendations which were taken to the corporate leadership team, and they've all been accepted, and they have wider implications for the general conduct of consultations by the council going forward. So as a corporate leadership team, we take into account and take on board those particular findings and recommendations, and of course, recognise as a body of professionals who are invested in getting the best outcomes for children that this has been a difficult process for all involved, for parents who are involved in this, but also for everyone who's been contributing to this piece of work. Jason, I don't know if you've got any further comments.
Thank you. Jason Moran, Director of Education and Inclusion. I won't say much more to kind of supplement what Jackie said, but perhaps just to offer a few thoughts, because I'm often asked the question, well, you've come in, I've been in post a year now, so what now, what next? As Jackie said, I think the review is really crucial. The recommendations are council-wide, so along with every other service, we'll be looking at it in terms of what it means for us. But we've been clear that there are also a number of changes at play. We have to look at the introduction of the funded entitlement and what the impact of that is. So we'll be looking regularly as we do monitoring kind of what's happening at the centres. The council's financial challenges are well known to probably everybody in this chamber, so that is still a factor. But we've been very clear when we spoke to staff, as Jackie said, that we'll be taking this academic year that we're in, 2025 to 2026, to pause and reflect and to consider. So there are no plans at this point. There are no hard plans at this point for any changes. It's just a moment to pause, reflect, review, and plan accordingly, taking count of all the data. So I just wanted to make sure that that was known and understood.
Thank you very much. I think we can now move over to the parent group representatives. You've got 15 minutes. And once again, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. My stopwatch is on. I know the time here is really valuable. Thank you for inviting us. I just want to say thank you to the committee. We really value that you bring us here and ask for our voice and deliberately include the voice of parents. We were really disappointed this evening at 5 o'clock to find that our written submission that we'd prepared for you all to read so that you could, there's so much information around that you could read, was actually excluded. So we're trying to scrabble together to say the things we wanted to say without overloading on detail of things past. We have a lens of looking forward too, but we want to make sure that looking forward doesn't exclude learning from the things that did happen and that really didn't go so well. So my name's Beatrice. I'm here to represent the Save Our Children's Centres campaign group. That's a group made up of parents and carers that attend Hackney Children's Centres, especially the ones that were impacted by closures in 2021 and 2024. We're also the parent group that launched the judicial review and went through that process. And I want to add that that was never a process we wanted to do. I myself was like, no, let it play out. We won't need this. And I was wrong. And the people who wanted to do the review were right. And we needed that to halt a process that wasn't working. So we also really appreciate that this lessons learned review was launched, because I do think there are a lot of things that needed to be learned. And I would hate to see this happen again. We also believe that financial resources need to be used for young people, and the young people of Hackney really, really need this sort of support and this sort of care in the environment that they're growing up in. So we share also that view. And we really agree with some of the things in the review, such as the need for independent support to quality assure consultation documentation, and training for consultation processes. And also that there would be more engagement with parent and carer forums, which didn't really feel like it happened. And I went to every parent forum meeting. I won't bring all of that experience into it, but I didn't feel like that was what happened. We also thought was really important was ensuring the well-being of staff. I think they're sometimes the excluded party in learning lessons, and they deliver amazing high-quality childcare to our young people. They're not paid loads. They do brilliant work, and I know because I bump into them every day because I live opposite the Children's Centre that it was an incredibly personally challenging process. So we really support putting them front and centre alongside young people because they matter too. My one challenge with the consultation, with this lessons learned, was that it does miss some things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a few minutes about things that we thought were taken out of scope, which should have remained in scope, and then also the lessons we wanted to be learned, which also aren't included. And then we're going to pass over to representative of the current campaign, which is trying to engage with the council about fee rises. It's not a formal consultation, but for lessons to be learned, we need to see that the engagement with the current parent group is following the lessons that have been outlined. And so their voice is really important to see whether the things that are written in a document are actually happening in practice, because it's easy to write words and it's much harder to do the thing. So I think this voice is really important for these parents to talk about what their experience is now. So one of the main challenges we saw straight away from the lessons learned, well, even before it was written, was that it completely excluded the parent voice. We asked repeatedly to be involved. We knew it was happening, and that formal request was declined. So that's a big thing. Parents, we are the voice of our children, and children are who we're all sitting here because education, children, young people scrutiny, that's the voice we want to hear. So by taking parents' participation out, I think the review lost a lot. I think there could have been ways to include it, and I think that was a missed point. And it also fails to acknowledge the review that wasn't that clear about what happened at the judicial review, and I think a bit of honesty up front that the 11th option that was added to a summary report that was authored by an external consultant and that was changed, I think accountability needed to be in there for that, to say that this happened. It really affected trust and confidence, and it clouded the whole experience. Exempting that report, the full report, also contributed to there being, I don't know, mistrust, and the data wasn't clear, and that, I think, set everyone questioning everything. The report also lacks a bit of precision and accountability. It dances this really frustrating line between at once taking out the content of the consultation, how accurate it was, but also going along implied lines that staff showed clear care and the council officers showed clear care for centre staff. I did not witness that, and I did not witness that as a parent. So I felt like there were things that were taken out and then things that were put in that weren't really backed up either. Yeah, taking the accuracy and accessibility of the consult documentation out of scope is really important. I sat with like 3 parents for hours going over it. It was so complicated. There were 7 documents. It was difficult to follow, and that's notwithstanding the addition of the 11th option, which is the reason the council conceded the judicial review. I think that's important, the accessibility part, and that wasn't included. It also wasn't clear how the lessons learned would be put into practice. And that to me is like the crucial part of running an exercise like this. We learn some things, what are we going to do about it? And then how will the education department demonstrate that those lessons have been learned in practice? That's completing the loop. Learn the lesson, implement the lesson, and check it did what it needed to do. And it doesn't have that. So that also is missing. And I would really welcome seeing more clear outline of what that looks like. So they're the things that we saw were excluded from the report, which I think would have made it much stronger had they been in there, because they're important, and it's important for, again, the credibility aspect of writing something like that, to exclude the voice of parents is so important. Then there's the lessons we wish you'd learned, and I'm just going through these because we only had everything changed at 5 o'clock, so we're still figuring out what the most important things to say are. So I think there's a point that we should learn about transparency and accountability. I already mentioned the exempting of a formative document meant that none of the data that was presented could be sourced. And that was really a big problem, and our questions as parents just weren't answered. So we're going, where does this data come from? What does this mean? Many of the centres didn't recognise the data that was used, for example, around occupancy. Those questions are never answered. Like, I asked that question at 3 public meetings, someone else asked it, never answered. There just wasn't the to and fro of information. So we also really wanted the council to put in there that they were going to adhere by the gunning principles in all future consultations and really make sure to follow like public best practice as it's laid out. I mean, that has cost time, money, energy. As a group, we wanted to work with the council, as I know this current group around fee engagement really want to, but that's not happening. And so that frustrated engagement becomes challenge. I don't think it has to be that way. So more open meetings. And that leads on to another point, which is external facilitators need to be used for public meetings. My belief is that if you're involved in a process, you can't facilitate a conversation. Jason's predecessor was facilitating the previous meetings and had also designed the consultation, and it's a clear conflict to sit there holding a process and holding questions when you designed it. It's not appropriate, and that caused a lot of problems. Again, more clear engagement with staff. There were lots of meetings that happened with staff that were on Zoom, where the council officers were on Zoom and the staff, maybe 20 of them, were in one room trying to ask questions, trying to engage. It was soul destroying for them. And so I think they're in this review and their questions in the questionnaire were okay. I thought it was fairly light touch considering like the mental health challenges I've seen them face because of this continued uncertainty. They're really capable, amazing people, and I feel like they were forgotten and not enough was made to support them in the actual review. There needs to be more, and I think as a group we want to should see that that actually happens next time, not words in a document, but actions when it counts. Yeah, so we also need to, it doesn't talk about data, again, data accuracy taken out of scope. Really important that that remains in scope and that that is discussed, because it was very difficult to get proper conversations with the council about those things. And there were really good options in the Ernst & Young summary report about what action the education department could do to make children's centres function better and more efficiently. And we can't see that they have happened either. So the lessons learned doesn't learn also that the council paid for an external report, exempted it from public scrutiny, but we can't see how the things that were quite useful in there, centralised marketing, centralised submissions, they weren't put into practice. So those missing points for me and for us as a group, we read it, I have to say I was quite frustrated. Like, we want to learn lessons with you. We want to engage alongside the council with you, not against. Like, I don't want to be here talking at these sorts of meetings. We want to be in rooms designing how we can make things better. We apply considerable resource that we don't have in our time to support these processes. And I think it could be done more constructively and more collaboratively. And that lesson I don't see in there either. You know, the voice of parents excluded from the review. I think that things could be done differently, and I hope that that changes in future. So I'm going to pass over now. 30 seconds late. Here you go.
Thank you. My name's Anne, and I'm representing a group of hundreds of parents, but certainly I think our WhatsApp group's around 200 now, that are part of Protect Hackney Nurseries. When we started, last time I was in this council room, it was at the beginning of May, and I asked a question about why the fees were rising. And I said, I'd like to be your evidence, not your enemies. And I put all of the resources I had, which are few. I'm a single mom with 2 jobs, and I sleep about 3 to 4 hours a night, into doing a survey and trying to collect as much input from parents. And these parents are smart people. And at the beginning, I was really optimistic. And to be honest, right now, I feel really beat down and exhausted by this process. And I didn't know that Beatrice existed and that the campaign from 2024 existed. I didn't know about an Ernst & Young report. I didn't know about a lessons learned review. And it's shocking to me that that all of this was there and these lessons could have been learned. And all I'm here to say now, on behalf of all the people who can't come because they're working on getting supper and bath time and bedtime, is that there were lessons that were not applied in our experience in 2025. We were told that the council had no legal obligation to consult us on a fee rise, but they also cut subsidies. And this was, we believe, a significant policy shift that needed a consultation. And more so if the council was worried about legitimacy, trust, accountability, and restoring the relationship with the public, especially the parents of Hackney who are really struggling to afford raising kids here, then, you know, maybe a consultation would have been a good idea. And I think that the lessons learned review mentioned that. Like Beatrice said, I was really surprised that the lessons learned review itself did not include parents. I think that was a real loss to understand the full view of what happened. And it just, from that point on, it was like, well, then everything else was a bit flawed. But there were some things in there that could have been useful. A failure to establish a steering group that was recommended, page 8, 9, but it was never set up. If that was there, maybe our campaign wouldn't have happened. There was a failure to give parents the agency in being able to find alternatives. We brought so many alternatives of, you know, how the fees could have been set up differently. There were parents who are lecturers of public policy and economics who suggested alternatives. We went deep into the data, and it wasn't, and it felt like we were being talked down to and told that we misunderstand instead of giving us the chance to co-create the new policy together. Also, the staff issues that Beatrice had mentioned, we feel that there's still persistent staff shortages, which we're told have been held up by consultations and reviews, but it is having a real effect on the impact of care and the well-being of the staff. I know some staff who have moved, and I think that if the council had just stopped this process, ring-fenced some of this budget, then maybe things would not have been so stressful for all of us. There's a few other things that have happened, but I don't have time to talk about it all right now. But there was a pattern of misleading information and lack of transparency. There were repeated errors in the communications to parents, even in the letter telling us about fee rises. It just talked about a 7.5% increase, but it didn't talk about the households that were getting a 69% increase, the households who, it actually left out a section of the columns of the previous fees that it gave a misleading picture of what was happening to a lot of the parents. And I only have 20 seconds left, and there's so many things I could say, but I feel handicapped because I don't have my slides. Anyway, yes, I hope that the lessons learned report is added to and parents are involved and it's put in practice. Thanks.
So just to finish what Anne said there, and the reason this was important is because this is a parent group that currently really want to be engaged with. So part of the lessons learned was about the consultations in 24 and 21, but it's also a broader question. And so we talked a broader question that's about how the education department engages with parents, brings in their voice, co-creates with them. And so I think the arc that we're trying to speak to, sorry, and I am running over, is to say that it's not like a barrage of criticisms, it's like a barrage of hopes and unfulfilled hope. And we saw it again when we all met. And I think what we want you to have learned is that parents are here to work with you, not against you. And once it becomes combative, like everyone loses, especially children, and especially when it goes legal, which is no one wants that. So yeah, thank you for having us here, especially on your birthday. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. Appreciate the strength of feeling for everybody here, and just, I suppose, just to reflect on how positive it is that we are here and that we're able to have this conversation and to help shape what, consultations that involve children and families in a similar way, what they might look like going forward. So it's a great opportunity for Scrutiny to be involved in this process, especially given our proximity to both of these consultations. Before handing over to the Commission for Q&A, I do have a question that I wanted to start with, which we might have some follow-up from other councillors, but I wanted to have a quick update on the position of the nursery at Old Hill. There are reports that the nursery has closed. Is this a temporary closure? And if so, when will services be resumed on site?
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, the Old Hill situation, I believe there's a misconception that the children's center there has closed. It hasn't. You will recall that there was a school organization change project last year. As part of that, Old Hill School merged with Harrington Hill School. The pupil bodies merged, so the children from Old Hill School are there as part of that. We stated that the intention was to keep the children's center open on that site. As part of that process, you are required to submit something which is called a material change application to Ofsted in order to do that. That actually has to be done by the school, by Harrington Hill School, and not by the council. Of course, my officers are supporting them. There is a backlog in that process and a 90-day turnaround period. We are supporting that by speaking with the Ofsted and the DFE to try and get that expedited. But the center isn't closed. The staff have gone to other sites and the provision maintained for the children.
Sorry, do we have any, did you want to ask any follow-ups?
Yeah, Nelly, is this a unique, so thank you for that answer. Is this a unique situation in relation to Old Hill with this transfer to Harrington Hill? Is this possible to happen in any other situations? And just, yeah, anything more you can say about what you're doing to ensure it opens as soon as possible, and this doesn't happen in any other perhaps similar situations, if such similar situations may occur. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's not common that a children's centre changes kind of its school sponsored, if you will, like this. So it is quite a unique situation. I met with DFE colleagues on Tuesday to try and expedite the situation. Of course, we understand that's going to be difficult for parents. Our Hackney education team supported the school to contact parents and to put mitigations in place and to explain that. And we're being told that hopefully that can be done sooner than the 90-day turnaround. So I don't think it's common. I don't think it's going to happen again. And, you know, a lot of this is dependent on the kind of time process in which you take to make the school organization changes. It is unfortunate, and it will be resolved as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much. I'm going to kick us off with the first question, and then I've got Councillor Turbot-Deloff online who would also like to ask a question. But if others can indicate, and I will write your names down and take your questions in turn. I'd like to kick us off with a question around parent engagement. So as has been referenced by many of you this evening, parents are key stakeholders in the reconfiguration of children's centres, and it's clearly important to understand their views and opinions about the withdrawn consultations, not only to better understand what went wrong, but also to help develop a pathway forward. In this context, why was the decision taken not to engage and involve parents in the lessons learned report? And was this not potentially a missed opportunity to build trust with key stakeholders and move forward? If I might, I will bring in Councillor Turbot-Deloff, that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Apologies that I'm not feeling too well today, so I'm not there, hence joining online. Thank you. And I do want to also express, I share the view that this is a great moment, and I appreciate the Commission taking the time and efforts to make this space happen today. Also to the parents who submitted, for the submission that you sent to us, we members of the Commission have read it. I have found it really, really helpful. So my question to you as parents, representatives, is how much do you think from the Council's review overlaps with yours, and where do you think is the major gaps that we as a Commission and as a Council should be looking into to guide us for future, so we avoid a similar situation in future? Thank you.
I think that was directed at the parent group, Councillor Turbot-Deloff. Okay, I'll hand over to Council Officers first for the first question, please.
In respect of the review itself, the review was a review of the internal processes and managing the consultation up to the point of the judicial review. It wasn't a review of the entirety of the detail of the consultation. So the parents' views about the consultation were gathered throughout the entire process. So there were face-to-face meetings that the education team who were responsible for this had at the centres at the time. So we had a lot of the parents' views about the consultation. And this report was very much about the internal processes in the council that led up to the point of the review itself and what steps could have been taken to avoid the judicial review.
Is that a follow-up? No? Follow-up? Follow-up? Yes, Councillor Cicerunga, please.
Thank you very much. I did want to start at the beginning and was really concerned about parents and carers not being engaged. So I would actually like to ask the parents, what would work for you going forward in terms of measures and practical solutions? What would work for you in response to going forward, that you have the trust and that you have the engagement from the beginning, because we like that to be at the beginning. So we really appreciate to hear your voices in the chamber today. Thank you.
Before handing over to the parent group, just a comment, I suppose, and that is that I really do appreciate the difficulty between not wanting to go through the whole consultation process again. But I think my sense is that when we're thinking about how can we, even just thinking about the process, what does transparency mean? What do people believe transparency means? I think is something that potentially there may have been an opportunity to gather some perspectives on what that means and what that looks like. And I suppose there is a sense, as the sentiment that's come across from the parents today, that because it's been appreciating that many of the people officer-wise in the room today, have not been on this full journey through the consultation from 2021 to the most recent one that we're talking about, but there may well have been some opportunities, even with regards to internal processes, to have potentially asked for some sort of contributions looking back as opposed to in the midst of that process, is just my observation. But also I think in terms of a gesture of sort of starting as you're clearly demonstrating the commitment through the report and what you've shared today to work on sort of having improved relationships with parent groups. Over to Councillor Sizer.
Yeah, I'm in the category of not having been there right from the start, but upon coming into this role, I did make it my every effort to meet with people, to online and in person, to respond to emails in a really timely way, to go out and meet as many of the children's centre staff as possible. So I don't think it's fully the whole picture that we've been behind closed doors. We have tried to engage. I do want to listen and be working together, because I do firmly believe that we are trying to have the same outcome. And yes, it's a bumpy road, but there's no sense from our perspective of trying to withhold information or work behind closed doors. That's not at all how it's been, and I've certainly tried to not do that. Donna Thomas and myself met with the parent group. We've been in many early morning meetings with staff at the children's centres, and I'm going tomorrow and following weeks. I think it's really work in progress, and I absolutely take on board that there are things to change and get better at, and we are listening. But I don't think it's a fully fair summary to say that we haven't engaged.
I think that reference is quite specifically just to the report, I think, as opposed to necessarily any processes that have been around that. So I think that whilst I appreciate that engagement with parents may have contributed towards the report, I think that it might have been useful if that had been a bit more evident in the report, to especially given the sentiment around it all.
Chair, if I may, so the author of the report, she reviewed all of the scrutiny conversations that had previously happened when parents had been giving their views about the consultation, so was able to ascertain their views that way. She also went through the consultation documents themselves and reviewed some of the feedback we had through the process of the consultation. So it wasn't that parents' views and how they expressed them were not considered in the body of this report at all. And I think parents had been quite vocal in their views and feelings about the consultation process and the scrutiny that the author of the report went through in absolute fine detail. She also reviewed emails that had come back and forth as part of the process as well, that had come from parents, to make sure that the sentiment of those was being reflected.
Thank you. Now over to the parent group representatives, please, for the other questions.
Thank you for inviting our voice back in. I appreciate that. Last time I had to sit on my hands, and that was very difficult. So I think there are a few things. Reading documents that were submitted, a year ago, 12, 14 months ago, sort of thing, is one way of hearing a voice. I think when we wrote and asked to be included and that request was declined. I think that sends a clear signal about the parent voice. I don't think you can get away with that. That's just what happens. In terms of learning from what happened in the last consultation, there's definitely a problem in complexity of documentation. It was so difficult to read. I mean, there are lots of non-native English speakers. There are a lot of people who, I mean, we printed them all out and tried to understand them all. Some of the documentation, the FAQ section on the consultation website was updated all the time. So every meeting, it was like the goalposts were shifting and we would analyze things and it would change and then be like, well, this was in there and that was in there. And so there was that transparency. And I think you spoke to trust. That did not make us trust the data that was there. And our questions fundamentally weren't answered. Again, I'll come back to the point I made about a council officer facilitating a consultation meeting. There's just not enough of a separation. The conflict of interest is really clear to me that if you structured a process, you'll sit in a public forum and defend it, which means allowing some questions, shutting others down, allowing some answers to run really long. They were relatively short meetings given how much. I mean, I counted 7 documents and an ever-updating FAQ and a wholly exempted report, which meant none of the source data in the EY summary report was visible. I mean, we had a consultant sit and work on it for like 2 days. That's a working parent, by the way, till 1 in the morning to try and figure out if they could even verify some of the population data. We could not find sources. This is a problem. We want to ask those questions. So how did you come to your decision? What happened? What fed into that? And those opportunities were not there. And I'm going to add that those meetings are also really unpleasant to participate in. They felt like demeaning, aggressive. We felt very othered. So I think to build trust would be one, to consult at a formative stage before decisions have been made. That consultation felt like a foregone conclusion based on quite rocky data. It was basically based on the occupancy data of the children's centres, which 2 of them didn't recognise. And the question of where they came from, what period they covered, when they were sourced, was never answered, and we submitted that repeatedly. So those sorts of things, I know the lessons learned speaks to structuring higher quality consultation documents, but trust comes from saying, oh yeah, this comes from here and this is why we thought this, or before even a consultation is launched, bring the parent voice in. We aren't on the other side, and I feel like that us and them point is part of the problem. So I think a bit more co-creation. I think we, as parents in 2024, acknowledge that some of the things in the suggestions in the Ernst & Young report were really good suggestions, and that fees may have to change and be rebanded, and that could be done with parents. And so I think that is probably the biggest learning, along with owning the mistake of adding the 11th option. I don't want to rehash the things that happened, but that was a big error to put an option in a report that looked like it came from an external consultant that was added by someone in the council. That has to, in order to have credibility, the lessons learned report needed to say, we really messed this up and we're sorry. And it didn't say that. I think to rebuild, there needs to be a bit of acknowledgement and working together.
I'm just going to come in on that point because I think we're veering towards making statements that I think are difficult to be aired in this forum. Essentially,
I mean, it's all in the consent order from the judicial review. Most of that's publicly available.
Well, in terms of, so we need to be careful in this space, recognizing also that not everybody involved in this process is here today. So it's difficult when when what's being shared is that attempts have been made to do things. I don't want to get into a backwards and forwards where officers are having to substantiate, what's being shared, and the relevant officers may not be in this space. It's definitely things that we may want to pick up outside of this meeting. But I think I think we need to be careful about drilling down into the detail of what has happened before, because I don't think we're the specifics of the challenge, because I don't know if necessarily the right people are in the room, or that this is the right space to be discussing that. I just wanted to interject just at that point because, but please continue if you had other
I
comments.
do think the main thing is to consult at a formative stage, openly, properly and transparently, because you have, as Anne said, a really smart parent group. We want the centres to remain open. We value them. And I do also want to add that I did see some shifts in the way the officers dealt with centre staff, for example. I wrote directly to the mayor and said, you need to meet staff in person by default. And I did see that change. So I also want to acknowledge that some things have changed. It's not a complete, nothing has changed. But consulting at a formative stage, having open forums, and Anne, what would you like to add since you're in this process?
Thank you so much. I would agree with everything that Beatrice said, including thank you so much for bringing it back to us to give us a little bit more time, because I think that what can be most useful to have a better future with this type of stuff is for these consultations to be more accessible. I think that there is a lot of expertise in the community. Unfortunately, it's very hard for us to work on the council's schedule, on the council's terms. Right now, you're speaking to 3 parents. All of us have graduate degrees, but I still, had to stay up until 1, 2 a.m. and get up again at 5 a.m. as well as getting up at 2 and 3, whatever, with my baby, to be able to make this work. And other people can't do that. There's a lot of moms and dads back home who aren't even as privileged as we are, who are suffering just as much and just as frustrated. And the best they can do is WhatsApp us and say, can you mention this? And I say, I'm sorry, I ran out of time. So there's, like we've said, there's been a lot of great ideas brought forward, but then we feel like they've been ignored. There's been a lot of late nights reviewing documents, but then the council doesn't allow us to present them. And as a resident, sometimes we feel like the council's just kind of patting themselves on the back while ignoring all of our concerns and not giving us a chance to engage. And so we need accessibility, we need time, we need to be heard, and we also need to be taken seriously because there are a lot of great ideas and expertise we can bring to the table.
Thank you very much. I've got a question from Councillor Binny Lubbock and then Councillor Troughton, please.
Thank you. I'd push back a little bit on the idea that it wouldn't be helpful to have parents involved in this process, because I think they highlight some really important points around the broader issues around transparency and the data and information that they've been able to access, and that was kind of one of the key issues in the judicial review. So I'm just wondering if in future more can be made available in terms of modelling, financial modelling, quality impact assessments, occupancy data, all of those things that under the Gunning principles should help provide sufficient information for consultation respondents. And to Jason's point around the financial situation, I think some of that modelling and financial data would help give a better understanding of the sort of cross-system impacts and where there could actually be invest-to-save options as well, because we know that these are places that actually save us money in other areas from council spending.
So I think that's maybe more of a statement.
And the question is, can that in the future be a part of any consultation process?
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Troughton.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, parents, for coming and presenting us with your perspective. And I feel very confident that as a commission and as an authority, we do take that on board. And I think as a commission, we will definitely be mindful of what you said tonight going forward. But I would like to just move things on a little bit, and because the review did refer to a lack of capacity within the team that dealt with the consultation. There was a lack of dedicated support and resourcing for what is essentially complex consultation process. So we're now undergoing a council-wide transformation, and budget cuts that are the perfect storm for whereby these sorts of things can happen. So how can the cabinet and officers reassure the commission that there will be sufficient capacity expertise and resources to maintain effective consultation and engagement, you know, in the face of all these future demands. Thank you.
Thank you for that. The recommendations from the Lessons Learned report have been accepted by CLT and are being used as the basis of a checklist for all future consultations going forward, so that the responsible director can assure themselves that they've got sufficient resource and to be able to conduct the consultation effectively. So yes, it's absolutely been taken on board. Does that help?
It does, Director, but you know, unfortunately, transformation involves, you know, the abandoning of processes. Sometimes not complete abandoning, but you know, processes change, staff change, job descriptions change. You know, the net can become very wide, and you know, I just wonder, maybe this is about, you know, revisiting, monitoring, building into KPIs, you know, systemic embedding, you know, in the systems of the organisation. Can you expand on that a little bit more, please?
Certainly. So as I said, the recommendations will be a checklist, and in terms of the resources, it will be, I think the report was specific about project and programme management resource. So it's ensuring we've got sufficient capacity for that. So at the moment, in terms of, we've already assigned a programme manager to work alongside the team who are working for children's centres to look at what the future may look like. So we have already identified a dedicated and experienced resource to work on that particular project. And in terms of the rest of the transformation, we've certainly got dedicated resources to help with that.
And did either of you want to come in on Councillor Billy Lubbock's question about the future consultations, in the transparency point?
Sorry, if I may come in on this, please. I know Councillor Billy Lubbock, you made a comment about resources and finance, and I mean, I was just making a general comment on the challenge that the council faces, and as the other members have said, there's kind of extensive plans in place for that. But I may just go back to a few points that were raised today, and it's been really kind of helpful listening to the contributions from the parent groups. Just to pick up a few points, I think it's important to note just some specific comments around the Ernst & Young report, and that does predate me, but I am aware from my team that centres did work closely with that team. They provided data, so there was some linkage there. But I just want to come on to the point about collaboration and listening and consultation, and we're not talking about children's centres, but at the moment we're a consultation on our education strategy. And one of the priorities speaks very clearly to area-based planning and looking at need. And that does speak to schools, but also early years centres, children's centres, post-16, the gamut. So whilst it doesn't kind of lay out, well, this is what's exactly going to happen, what it does speak to is the need for collaboration within those settings themselves, but also listening to the community. And I just want to remind scrutiny members that not only have we done extensive consultation where members and myself have met with parents in person, online in the middle of August, sometimes late in the evening, just because that was the sessions that people could do, but also we did pre-engagement on that as well. Now, I'm not saying every consultation is going to move in that direction. We'll work within the confines with our colleagues and also with the recommendations. I take your point about external facilitation, for example. It is something that could be considered, but it doesn't. I want to point out that if you have a staff member leading a consultation, that doesn't in itself suggest a conflict of interest. So I think everything needs to be taken on its own account and merits. And when we designed that strategy, we thought really carefully about how we could get that parental voice and shape it. So if you look at what we took out to early engagement and where it is now, it's completely different. I mean, the number of priorities have changed. So I think there is practice that shows that we can move in that direction. Of course, if we have to get into some really challenging conversations about change and transformation, that's going to be a motive. But what I'm hoping we could do is work in the way that we've been working, and that we've worked, for some time in, is that having those early engagements and having those in-person sessions. And I think within, reason, and the point has been made about resource and stretching a team, I think, my entire team is supported on that. So I think we can find the resource to try and get the feedback that we need.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Borden and then Councillor Sisarunga, please.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I think one thing I'm taking away from this really is just how much as a sort of community in Hackney we value our children's centres, which, I would say are the sort of, the gold standards in terms of childcare. I mean, we do have a number of very good childcare providers in Hackney, but children's centres are the only childcare which maybe caters for the whole range of the community, and I think that's extremely valuable in itself. So and I'm very proud that as a council we are managing to continue with our children's centres in a way that some other councils have not been able to. But I would also like to, having said that, to widen the discussion out a little bit, and maybe speak to our consultation and engagement team, and just really maybe if they could tell us a bit really about the context of this in terms of sort of Hackney consultations and engagement, and what they take away really as a team from the sort of lessons learned report. How typical was this sort of outcome in terms of the wide range of consultations that Hackney runs, and are there any sort of underpinning principles and practices and underlying Hackney's consultation and engagement with the public, and have you changed or tweaked your procedures as a result of the lessons learned report in terms of sort of broader engagement with the community? Thank you.
Would you mind? I think we're going to take another question. If you can hold that in mind or have a pen at the ready. Councillor Sisarunga, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm bringing it back into the chamber. We are a scrutiny commission and we have a significant role, and we can offer a critical friend forum. So my question is, can cabinet members and senior officers set out what role they can expect scrutiny function to play in the future decision-making processes for children's centres and any other difficult decision? Thank you.
Thank you. The white hand, it feels illogical.
Brilliant. As a consultation team, we've taken into account the recommendations. So as Jackie and Jason mentioned, that's actually been agreed corporately. So we've been looking across on how we best implement it across the whole organisation. So we launched a communities of practice where, as part of those sessions, we've given some training where we had some independent public consultation law expert come in and run about 5 sessions we've run this year to support the organisation in ensuring that we're effectively, using consultation practice to inform the work that we do. So one of the things that we're conscious of in terms of the recommendations is obviously they're broad and won't apply to absolutely every consultation engagement project. It's seeing the magnitude of the service change project. So that's something that we're incorporating. When we have a new project that's launched on a consultation, we ensure that we're talking to the service lead. So we collaborate with different departments in the same way that when we're looking to rerun this consultation, on children's centres will be looking at what the recommendations are and how do we ensure that the consultation process takes that into account, like the independent consultation expert, for instance, and working with the service to ensure that that's part of the process. But the way we work with departments is that collaboration. We're conscious of the fact that the departments are the experts in the technicalities of their service. So one of the examples that was given there around who would actually facilitate a session, what we usually recommend is the person that has that detailed knowledge of the service specific aspects of it.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I think Councillor Kennedy wants to come in as well. I've got a follow-up, but maybe you.
Thank you. No, it was just on this, and actually specifically to respond to Councillor Susa Rungi's very well-made point. There absolutely is a role for Cabinet to work with scrutiny, and it was one of the very specific recommendations from the Corporate Peer Challenge that we had recently. And I believe we have a meeting of Cabinet with scrutiny chairs and vice chairs in the diary to make sure that we actually maximise the benefit of these meetings, and how, particularly on decisions like this, that we as politicians actually step up in the way that Florence, Jason and Jackie have pointed out, that officers have stepped up and acknowledged that sometimes you have very difficult consultations with very complex sets of documents, and we need to change some of the ways we work in order to be completely across it. So I look forward to those conversations, but absolutely Cabinet committed to that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Chris Kennedy, and amongst my portfolio responsibilities is communications.
Councillor Gordon, and then I'll bring you in, Jackie.
Yeah, I think Martin wanted to come. Yeah, I mean, actually, Councillor Kennedy's touched on one of the points I was going to make. Florence, thank you very much for your contribution. I mean, I just really wanted a bit more of a response to the very well-made points for the parents about the presentation of the information, the complexity, but also sort of, you know, access to underlying data. And also, I suppose, really, whether you've seen any sort of general lessons learned about, you know, engaging with stakeholder groups who are, you know, across the council services, who are sort of intimately involved in the impacts of any change, whether you've made any sort of general sort of observations as a result of this process of how to improve that. Thank you.
I think it's sort of dependent on the key service change projects that have come up. What we're looking to do now is planning projects that are coming up and ensuring that the lessons from this are taken into account. We haven't had a big service change project that's launched since the children's centres, so this is still a learning in progress for us. But we're conscious, you mentioned the transformation projects that are coming up, that obviously we have to take this into account. I think the points you've made around accessibility is noted. You know, we're conscious that where we're talking about very technical, you know, consultation projects, building in that time to really pilot test and really just sense check that with people impacted, to just ensure that we're using language that's easy to understand, taking into account the fact that, you know, the language issue and the diversity in the borough. So that's the point that we acknowledge and take into account going forward.
Sorry, is it Martin? Did you want to come in, and then I'll bring in Jackie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to answer a couple of the questions from Councillor Gordon, Martin Schubert, the Assistant Director of Communications and Engagement. I work obviously alongside Florence. The council conducts somewhere in the region of about 90 consultations a year. This is the first that has been overturned by consent and judicial review in recent memory. The corporate consultation team oversees the vast majority of the consultation work of the council. Taking Councillor Troughton's point, we forward plan, we project, we present to lead members, we present to CLT. So within the best of our ability, we try and align the work of the team with that of the corporate transformation programme. We have a corporate transformation programme. We don't have disparate bodies of transformation taking place without that oversight. So there are recommendations regarding capacity and capability within the team. As Jackie, the group director, said, they've been taken on board, they've been responded to by CLT. The council has invested in the team, so when there are specific bodies of work, programs of work, we can invest in ring-fenced capacity, we can invest in that kind of QA and oversight that these lessons learned have suggested. And Florence and myself and the team, we work now to try and project as best we can. And then perhaps one of the points we've made, but I will just reiterate it, there is no one size fits all when it comes to consultation and engagement. We have to take each project on its merits, according to the very specific needs of that program, but then also the audiences that we're engaging with. So when we look at introducing, for example, a livable neighborhood, you'll see a wealth of information put into the public domain about road usage, about pedestrian flows. But of course, that's very specific data. And then when we come and look at something in another service area, we'll have to tweak the approach as well. What I would say underpinning all of that is a commitment to accessibility. So when we have been working in this space, we've conducted face-to-face engagement. We've done engagement with specific communities and ethnicities. There's an underlying council commitment to translate when it's necessary, and we'll always translate information. We try and put as much as we can into the digital domain, where of course read aloud, browse aloud, online translation facilities are always available. So we will always commit. We'll often do it on a case by case, or again when it's requested. We have arrangements with translators, so that commitment to accessibility is constant. But the needs of any specific consultation and engagement exercise will always be considered according to what it is, the service parents, carers, and any other audience need, and then what's available within the gift of the council too.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the accessibility, what we're really of information in consultations, what we're really mindful of is the kind of breadth of the audience. So there's a real balance to be had by the technicality of the information and the accessibility of the information. So you're always going to have some residents who are absolute experts, and then there'll be residents who aren't experts. So it's about getting that balance. So in terms of the lessons learned report, the steering group option was specifically in mind about whether that would be possible to test the accessibility of the documents. So that was part of the lessons learned about, is this accessible? Is it A, technical enough, and B, is it understandable enough? So that was definitely one of the features. In response to the question about the role of scrutiny in big decisions, I think it's, in terms of children education, we have very frequent scrutiny meetings, and we bring scrutinises some very contentious decisions that we've had to make over the last couple of years. So I think it's not an issue of what will we do, because we do it already, and we welcome the opportunity to bring difficult pieces of work, because as officers of the council, we're here. We've made these career choices because we want to serve communities, but we have also had very difficult jobs to do in terms of helping the council balance its wider budget and make some difficult decisions about that. But our hearts and our values are very much, my group directorate, about children and supporting families, which is why we welcome the role of scrutiny in helping us to do that.
Thank you, Jackie. I think the point in regards to involvement and scrutiny perhaps is maybe more around timing also. So I think that there are different times at which we're able to sort of engage with processes. And I think that in a number of instances, we've been engaged in the process almost as part of the consultation itself. And there's a question, I think, which Councillor Kennedy touched on, about whether actually it should be more common practice, which it indeed is for many of the other items that I think we've even worked through with yourselves, that we're brought in even earlier than that, because I think that that's a real opportunity often to bring stakeholders together in what we appreciate from today and other sessions that we've had with various stakeholders on really contentious issues, to really get a sense of what are going to be the challenges, what are going to be the things that need to be considered as part of the consultation. But I appreciate that there can be some challenges around that. Jason, and then is this a connected question, Councillor Binny Lubbock, or a separate question? Otherwise,
it's slightly separate, more about the future.
Okay, I'll have your name and Councillor Pinkerton. Jason, please.
Thank you. Just to pick up on the point that you made, and I'm just going to go back to and echo something that I think Martin and Florence said, which is, that it's difficult to look at consultation as a unique entity when you're dealing with so many different projects, and you mentioned 90 a year. Just thinking back to some of the things that we've brought, we brought our HEALS plan, our Hackney Education Alternative Learning strategy, our learning service, which isn't even at the launch phase yet, and that was incredibly valuable, as was actually some of the other activities that you've undertaken, which allowed us to even meet people in this chamber and then take forward those conversations. And of course, our education strategy, which is coming to you shortly, although we have referenced it here, but we're bringing our school organization plan, which will touch upon some of this work, as well as our SEND strategy. So I would hope that there's a commitment. We can't always bring everything at the right time, and we are sometimes governed by timetables, but I think where there's something that we feel would really benefit from this process, and I think we've demonstrated that we have done that and will continue to do that. Just to go back to any plan changes, and I really want to make this point because several times tonight people have said, well, another consultation. We haven't made any decisions at that point. We have a steering group set up, taking account of what was mentioned in the lessons learned review, and we're looking at this issue, and we're beginning to roll out our strategy. And when we get to the point, which will, be early in any point, then we would want to come here, but also think about the best way to engage parents in the wider community. So I really want to make clear that we haven't taken on any decisions for any further change at this time. We will be looking, we will be reviewing, taking account of things that have already happened and working through the processes that are there for us.
Thank you, Jason. Councillor Binny Lubbock and then Councillor Pinkerton, please.
Thank you. That dovetails nicely into my question, which is I'm glad we're in this sort of pause and reflect moment, and I'm sure as part of that reflection, it'll be really important to get the stakeholders and the parents involved at a really early stage. And I imagine one of the things that they might ask for is for sort of a ring fencing of the children's centres budgets, and early, because we know the early childcare provision is a good return on investment for society and I think for the council. But during this process, it would be helpful to know that for any future plans, the Ernst & Young review that was published as part of the consultation made a number of recommendations to improve the efficiency and long-term sustainability of the future children's centres. Can Cabinet members and or senior officers confirm the position of the Ernst & Young review in relation to future decision making for children's centres? Will it still be used as a reference point? And update the Commission on any progress that's been made in implementing other cost saving or income raising recommendations that were made in that report?
Councillor Pinkerton, please.
Thank you. So obviously, thank you for everyone for the contributions. Great to hear from the parents about the impact of these abandoned consultations. I guess the other main sort of stakeholder that aren't here this evening would be the staff of the children's centres, and obviously these abandoned consultations have had negative impacts on their well-being as well. So could officers just set out, please, what learning they've taken from the lessons learned report in terms of the nature and level of support that will be offered to impacted staff in any future consultations of this nature? Thank you.
I'd like to just pick up on the staff point because I think it's absolutely vital. You're totally right. And I think it's no surprise to say that none of us would have wanted the anxiety that some of the staff were experiencing, and we're really keen to help in any way going forward. So obviously the staff assistance programme was recommended to anyone that was of need, and that was mentioned several times. We've engaged with staff, gone along and met throughout August, as Jason's mentioned, you know, and will do going forward. We have dates in the diary to go and meet with staff over the next few weeks, and I've said specifically that I'm really keen to make sure that their well-being is absolutely front and centre of everything going forward, because I totally agree. The work that they do day in, day out is exhausting enough anyway, and I know that this has been a source of anxiety, so we're really keen to support and help in any way going forward, and we will be listening to them, and we will be in regular touch. So I just wanted to put that in as an assurance.
In respect to the EY report, a lot of the data that was supplied to that report is no longer relevant, and it was 2 years ago. So over the course of the next 12 months, my team will be working with the children's centres, reviewing the impact of the new free entitlement, the fees and charges, looking at the occupancy rates, and looking at how we can work with centres to become as sustainable as they possibly can on the funding that is available to them, that is affordable for everyone. So that's our ambition for the next 12 months.
Just a quick follow-up on the recommendations that were made for cost savings and revenue raising. Is there an update on how many of those recommendations have been implemented?
I don't have that to hand, sorry, we can follow that up later.
Thank you very much. I think we've actually covered many of the questions that we'd intended to ask this evening, and I think we've covered a lot of ground, both in terms of the questions that have been asked and the answers that have, the really comprehensive answers and contributions at the beginning of the meeting. I think perhaps there's a final point that we should end on, and that is that Councillor Terbitaloff started by asking parents about what they felt were the really critical things that could that they would hope would look different with any future consultation processes, to ensure that the experiences that they had were not present in any future consultation. And I'd like to put that a similar question to officers about what plans do we have in place to try and deal with the trust and confidence that has been compromised as part of these two consultation processes between parents and Hackney Education and the council more broadly. What steps are we taking to help rebuild this trust and confidence, which will be essential to any future engagement, and what actions has the council taken to address any wider sort of reputational damage associated with the consultation process as a result of the outcomes, so that we can really move forward with what's been proposed from colleagues from the consultation team and actually have a fresh start with a new consultation. I appreciate on this topic, it's worth me noting that there's no plans, but I think going forward, we know that as a council, we're in really precarious times, and that it's not going to be, I think that we expect that we will have difficult consultations to come down the road. So it would be really important to hear from you what you think is being done at the moment that would help to improve those processes going forward.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair, just for restating that we're being really clear that we're taking this as a period of reflection. But should we come to the point where we have to make changes again, the first thing I would say, I'll definitely speak about engagement and trust with parents, but the first thing I would say is that as was stated earlier, we absolutely intend to take account of the recommendations that were provided, and have already put in a steering group, and that is for staff, and that's a really important part of the process, where we just pause and take account of the changes that we've spoken about that are happening now, especially the impact of the free entitlement, which I know we're going to be coming on to the interim survey that we've done, but it's quite different. So that playing field is quite different. I appreciate that the financial playing field may not be different, but let's take it step by step. I think it's really important that we do that and not rush to any conclusion. So that would be the first point. And in terms of consultation, and again, I know I spoke about a very different process. where we were able to do a period of early engagement. So it would be very important for me as Director of Education, whose service this would fall under, to reach out and have conversations with affected groups. So I'm very happy to say that I would intend to do that. We would definitely want to look at this in an area-based way. That's very much how we'll be pursuing things. So looking at the local community, I appreciate that we've got groups represented today. But this is really about listening, but it's doing it within the frame of what's possible and what's practical. But again, I want to say things that have been echoed tonight. Yeah, we're all officers, but we all have backgrounds. Jackie's a social worker. I'm a head teacher. I've worked all the way from early years. I know I'm 6'5", but I've been a nursery teacher down on the ground. So we all recognize the importance of these points in education. So what we want to do is practical. We want to look at what's possible, and we'll do so, you know, within a really clear, transparent process. So I think that's what I'll say to that.
Thank you very much, Jason. One final question from Councillor Terbert-Deloff, please, and then we're going to move on to the next item.
I really appreciate, Chair. Thank you. It's more of a question, more a suggestion, and practical as well, and it follows to what Jason just said in terms of being practical about consultations. And I'm sorry I missed a little bit of what officers said. It's just because I got a personal call that came in. I'm a partially blind person, and I don't speak English as my native language. And I find that if consultations, for example, every consultation in the council came attached with a residents' assembly, to begin with, and also if we had a kiosk in the service center that has the consultations open every day for residents to come and engage, I think that would be really helpful as well for the team in the council. So I just wanted to put that on record as suggestions that I hope that are considered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Terbert-Deloff. I think Martin wanted to come in.
Yeah, thank you, councillors, and thank you, Chair. Just going back to the question prior, and then definitely I'd like to address the final question from the councillor. I think it is just it's worth reminding us all that whilst we really want to learn the lessons from this exercise, that's why we're here, that's why we're really keen to engage with the scrutiny process. And I'm really pleased that many of the recommendations that have been made, I can already evidence we're making progress towards. I would encourage everybody to read the Hackney Council Resident Survey, because every year we speak to over 1,000 residents as part of an independent, statistically reliable survey to ask residents on the doorstep just how well a job do they think we're doing in running services on their behalf. And 73% of residents say they trust the council a great deal. So levels of trust and confidence are high. 2 years ago, that level was 67%, so trust and confidence has increased by 6 percentage points in the last 2 years, and it's 20 percentage points higher than the LGA average. Now, the LGA is the Local Government Association. I'm not interested in necessarily comparing ourselves to the LGA. Let's compare ourselves to ourselves. You know, we hold ourselves up to a higher standard. But I think it's just really important that when we're talking about trust and confidence, and we're talking about the council's consultation and engagement exercises that were recently debated in a full council meeting, we acknowledge the statistics, and here we have learnt lessons. Absolutely, CLT have taken those lessons to heart. We have a council-wide system of learning. Florence and I are putting in place new processes to make sure we try and improve. But trust and confidence in the council is high, it's increasing, and it's 20 percentage points higher than the national average. So I know we've made mistakes on this occasion, and the whole council holds it, we hold our hands up for those, but we are doing a really good job. And when we compare ourselves to the national average, we're doing an excellent job, and that's on everybody here. It's not on us, it's on the role of scrutiny, it's on the role of all of the officers across the council. With regard to the points that Councillor Terbert-Deloff made, again, some of those same points were made in council last time we met, and council agreed with many of those recommendations. We do have a consultation hub in every library in the borough. We make printed and hard copy and accessible materials available within all of our libraries, but we agree with the suggestion that it would also be helpful to have those in the Hackney Service Centre or the Town Hall. So that's one of the points that was raised in opposition business last council meeting, that we're going to take forward to see if we can introduce over the next few weeks and months.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you everybody for your contributions towards this item. I think I'm going to move on now to the next item, which is somewhat connected and might help to inform thinking around our future of our children's centres, because we're at a really interesting point in terms of the increase in the free entitlement. But once again, thank you everybody for your contributions. We are moving on now to item 5, which is childcare sufficiency. Under the 2006 Childcare Act, local authorities have a duty to ensure, as far as is reasonably practicable, that there is sufficient childcare to meet the needs of working parents. In support of this duty, local authorities are required to undertake a childcare sufficiency assessment as a means to identify the availability of and demand for childcare in their local area. Statutory guidance, April 2025, also requires that local authorities should report annually to elected members on how they are meeting its duty to secure sufficient childcare. The most recent full childcare sufficiency assessment for Hackney was undertaken in 2024, and the next is not due to be completed until 2026. The Commission has requested an interim sufficiency update with particular reference to uptake of the extended free childcare entitlement in Hackney. Please note that the 3 stages of extended free childcare entitlement in the agenda pack. For this item, we have a number of contributors, many of the same contributors that we had for the previous item. Can I ask officers to present on the report for up to 10 minutes, and then I will ask parent representatives to contribute also up to 10 minutes, and then we will have Q&A from members of the Commission. Over to officers, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I must say you spoke to a lot of the points I was going to raise in the introduction that I just said in terms of providing the context and the history. But as you quite rightly said, we are now in the off year in terms of that. So what we're going to be providing this evening is the results of the survey. And I just want to thank my team for pulling that together so quickly. And I think you'll get a good sense of, in terms of how many of the childcare codes are being claimed. I would just say that this is very early data, and in terms of impact of this, and I'm sure those questions will come, and very happy to entertain those, but please do realize that we are just at the very early days of seeing this policy implemented. So please, let's just proceed in that way. But I'm going to introduce now Simone Brown, who's joining us on screen tonight. Simone is our early year strategy manager, and she's going to speak to the report. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you, everyone. Just to confirm that I'll be speaking about the survey report, which is a midterm review. So it's not a full sufficiency assessment, but the key takeaways from the survey report is in regards to the overall provider landscape. There's been a slight decrease in the total number of childcare providers over the last 3 years, and that includes our PVI settings, our private voluntary independent providers, and our state-funded schools. As we are aware, we've had some of our schools close over the last few years, and also some of our PVIs. However, we do have an increase in our independent schools, our settings within the Haredi community. The DfE estimated that we needed approximately 231 additional places by September 2025 for 30 hours for 2-year-olds and under. And in regards to that, we're seeing a number of providers offering this entitlement, particularly within the number of childminders now offering this. The number of providers delivering funded entitlement places has increased significantly from 2024, from 130 to 168. And again, a notable rise in childminders and private and voluntary providers, but also we're seeing an increase of our 2-year provisions within our state-funded schools. The January census data shows that the take-up of the 30 hours has evolved over the last 5 years for children attending our settings, which of course includes introduction of the first 2 phases of the childcare expansion rollout. This data, however, doesn't fully align with the picture in Hackney, as 21% of the children with valid eligibility code live outside the borough, and by default, potentially we have a number of children who live within the borough who are attending childcare outside the borough, due to obviously our location in regards to being so close to other local authorities. In regards to ensuring that we do have sufficient childcare places, we have taken up the Childcare Expansion Capital Grant, and this grant was intended to create places for 30 hours entitlement for children aged 9 months to 3 years, and also the wraparound provision for primary age school children. In regards to the take-up of the grant in Hackney, we estimate between 151 and 187 new places will be created by the end of the autumn term 2025. And as a matter of fact, quite a few have already been completed within our settings. There is a caveat with the survey report, is that we did have a low response rate, unfortunately, 43% to be exact. And we're in the midst of understanding why we had such a low response rate. And potentially that is down to other mitigating factors within the early years, which I believe was touched on earlier in regards to things like the staffing crisis, etc. But based on the 43% data that we received, a significant majority of the surveyed settings, including childminders, are planning changes to accommodate the childcare expansion, things around their staff ratios, potentially changing their business and model to accommodate more babies, and focusing on recruitment as well. However, many of our settings are cautious about making such changes without actually seeing the potential fruits of the labour, as it were, in regards to the number of children that will be attending their setting through increase in inquiries, waiting lists, etc. And of course, any information that we can provide in regards to the number of children who now have eligible codes. We're mindful that we have, as I've said, an increase in childminders, and they have the highest potential for expansion, particularly between the 3 to 5 age group. And also our play groups, our smaller play groups, they have significant scope for expansion potential in regards to currently being under capacity. The impact of the childcare entitlement expansion in the autumn term in the first instance will need to be looked at in greater detail over the autumn term and also over the next year, and also potentially other initiatives that the government have begun in regards to the Best Start for Life, i.e. the push for school-based nurseries. If more schools decide to open school-based nursery, this of course will positively impact the number of spaces available, but we also need to balance that with the impact that may have on other PVIs within Hackney. In addition, the survey and the childcare sufficiency report are based on supply and demand and not on contextual, local or national issues within early years, such as I've discussed, the nationwide staffing crisis. So although yes, potentially settings have the scope to open more places, we need to caveat that with the impact of the staffing crisis. Overall, we are cautiously positive that we have sufficient places within the borough, and we'll be looking at this in closer detail over the coming term and year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simone. Now over to the parent group representatives, please.
Thank you so much for letting us speak on this as well. It means a lot to us knowing that my child's going to be in the system for a while yet. So yes, the report talks about sufficiency. This is one of those big reports that I was up all night trying to read, and it's a little dense, but I think I got it. The way that parents see it is accessibility, and I think number one is affordability. And anyone with young children knows that kids are expensive these days, and a childcare place is over £1,000 a month, and rent in Hackney is over £2,500 a month. And if your take-home pay is maybe £3,000, you're doing well compared to most people. So it just doesn't add up. And by the way, that £1,000 a month is after you get the 30 free hours. That's just the tack on for the 2 extra days at the end of the week, because you can't take off a day of work because you have to pay for the rent and the childcare. So accessibility, affordability relative to real income and household budgets, not abstract averages, not relating one percentage in one bureau to one percentage in another bureau. How much money do I bring home after taxes? How much money do I have to spend on rent and food? How much money is there for childcare? And it's not enough. So then another challenge is flexibility of hours. A lot of the children's centers, they close, the one that my child's at closes by 5:30, but I'm in meetings until 6. So I have to run out halfway through. I'm the only woman in the meeting. I have to explain myself. You know, there's not enough for shift workers. This affects the choices that people are making. Also, the stability of those centers and the staff, we've already talked about this. There's a real sense of uncertainty about what's happening to children's centers. This plays into the choices that people are making. And finally, usability, places that family can actually access, not just on paper. And we'll come to that because there's a significant caveat in the report that I noticed. Just to talk about the affordability and housing costs for a second. So families are getting this double squeeze. Comparing childcare only to London averages, as the report does, is actually not taking into consideration how Hackney housing averages, which according to ONS July 2025, average rent in Hackney is 2,563 versus average London rent is 2,250. So Hackney's more expensive, and most bureaus of Hackney are under £2,000. So just saying like for like, when you look at childcare without looking at the other expenses on the budget, that breaks down what is parents' real affordability. I was speaking to some childcare workers and they said it used to be that when a kid comes to the nursery, they stay for 4 years, but now they're often gone after 1.5 years. Why? Because when a parent has a second child, they leave the bureau, because they cannot afford 2 children in this bureau anymore, because then your childcare costs are 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 4,000 a month. That's just not affordable when you still have 2,000 in rent. And where does the food come from? Where does everything else come from? I'm on 1 income. My income's not too bad, but even 2 is not going to cover that. Secondly, I just want to talk about something that's often missed. It was missed in the fee raises that our campaign was working on, and it seems to have been missed in this report as well. There's a lot of focus on the new funded hours, which I know are a stress on the centers as well, because the national budget isn't really covering everything that needs to be covered. But it doesn't talk about all the people who don't get those funded hours. And so the council has a legal duty to make sure that parents remain in work or undertake training. But I only found out through talking to fellow parents that if you're studying for a PhD or in school, then you do not get funded hours. And there are PhD students with kids, right? They can't get those 30 hours, but they have to spend their time dedicating to their studies and advancing their careers. If you're on a skilled worker visa, for example, all the people who are working and living in Hackney, working for the NHS, they do not get those funded hours. And when the childcare centres increased their rates this year, the rates went up to about 500 a week for these parents who have no recourse to public funds. 500 a week, you're talking about 2,000 a month for one child, right? Because you're a nurse or because you're working on your PhD or whatever. And that was just not considered. And they said, well, you're going to get these 30 hours, so, you know, you're probably going to be fine. You're actually only going to be paying maybe like 800 or 1,000 a month for your one child. But no, actually, you're paying much more if you don't get these funded hours. And by the way, 800's pretty expensive too. Also, if you have income thresholds that you're not meeting, maybe one of the parents is out of work, you're not going to get those hours. Still takes a lot of work to get that job, and you know, taking care of a kid at the same time is pretty tough. But also, any babies under 9 months old, you're not going to get that money. So this is happening to a lot of parents who have had a second child and are now realizing that with the rising cost of childcare for their first child, plus having a second child and being pressured to get back into the workplace before 9 months, there's no way that they can afford to have 2 children in childcare, right? So the result is that the cost of childcare is undermining employment. Personally, I've reduced my hours. I've given up a promotion just so that I can stay under this 55K limit before my costs would double at a council-run nursery. I mean, it's just crazy. Other people have just left the bureau, or they're just not having kids. One other thing I wanted to mention was that this idea of vacancies versus real access. So there's something in this report that says the data does not account for specific challenges schools and settings face in delivering any increase in demand, given, for example, increased number of staff required. Which I think means that they have a vacancy, but they don't have the staff to actually care for that child if they come into place, right? So like actually that vacancy is not in practical terms able to bring in more kids because there's ratios that they have to keep up. This is happening at my nursery. It's happening at a lot of nurseries where there's not quite enough staff for enough kids to come in and be in the room, right? So the report does say there's a lack of qualified staff capacity, fewer quality staff within Hackney, fewer staff in Hackney have degrees compared to other areas. They also say that the SEND, special educational needs and disabilities requirement is higher in Hackney than other areas. It's 1.8% in Hackney versus a 0.7% national average. And that requires extra training and staff capacity to support. And I think there's something maybe Anna can say about how a lack of childhood, early childhood education, early intervention is just going to increase your SEND burden and give you a bigger budget problem in other areas. If you don't have affordable childcare, you're going to find that less kids are school ready and more kids are needing more support once they get there. But that's another point. And then the inflexible hours, as I mentioned. Finally, one thing I wanted to mention was, obviously, I'm biased here, the children's centers that are run by the council are not scrutinized separately in this report. There's nothing that says this is what's happening to our children's centers. It just says here's what's happening to the whole of all of these private sectors. So I think it's worth us, parents deserve to know operational data, fee band breakdown, the age, who's in part-time or full-time, what's the staffing like, what's the spend on agency temp staff versus our full-time staff, and a regular impact analysis, what's going on with the financial modeling of fees, the accessibility, the equity impact analysis, all these things that we were asking for and trying to do with the council this year. I think I don't want to take all of the time. I'm going to just pass it over to Dr. Rowe.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak here. So I'm an academic economist and I've worked a lot on childcare, especially in the continental European setting. And I also know colleagues at the Institute for Fiscal Studies who've worked on the Sure Start evaluations, and I had them in my lectures. So yeah, I just want to say how happy I was also to be living in this borough, and this comes closest, the children's centers come closest also to the provision of similar to continental European countries. And in the sense that the provision is somewhat a function of income. However, I was quite shocked how now this proposal is overturning this and basically making the fee bands, abolishing the fee bands, and someone on now 55K has to pay as much as a household as 155K, even though even net increases, incomes are increasing across these families. So I think what's really important, and it was mentioned before, is that the council also remains an offering to a diverse set of people. And I think Hackney, as well as Islington and some of the other councils who do offer this sort of income-dependent childcare offering, is really trying to also access also the low income and the middle income. However, for without any subsidy, it's extremely difficult for households also around the 55K mark to 70K mark to actually access childcare full-time. What this now leads to is there is basically an increase. As soon as you earn £1 more, you hit 55K, your childcare costs on full-time childcare costs increase from around 7 to 12K a year. This is a tremendous amount for, say, a single earner who's just hit that 55K. What this results in is that people will take children out of nursery. They will reduce either the days or they will reduce their working patterns. That will result in lower school readiness of children. Or what families might be doing is also they're moving into the private sector because some other private nurseries are offering cheaper deals. What this will result in is that this will fundamentally also affect the socioeconomic mix at the children's centers. And this was also mentioned in the Ernst & Young report. However, in the consultation or in the for the fee band changes, however, this was not at all reflected. Potential demand changes were not at all reflected in the income calculations, and for us that was quite worrying. And I think we would like this to be addressed also in future childcare sufficiency reports. I think this really affects of which families can now access childcare in the future in Hackney. I think one thing to also mention is how important childcare is to also tackle longer run changes. So these policies will also affect a school readiness potentially negatively if some families cannot afford to send their children anymore, leading to much larger send expenditures in the future. And also we've heard some accounts from parents now that it's actually better for them to go on universal credit rather than actually remain in the labor force just due to these incentives. So it has these knock-on effects, and I would like the council to also consider, when thinking about childcare sufficiency, to also consider the knock-on effects on other parts of the budget. And last but not least, I think what's really important is also to just maybe hop over the channel a little bit and see what other countries are doing, and be fully aware that the council is under a lot of budget pressure. However, I think now having high childcare sufficiency and good childcare offering for all socioeconomic groups is really going to also ensure there will be lower, higher child readiness, better English acquisition. So I see this from some of my own work on universal childcare expansions in Germany in the 1990s that tremendously increased school readiness, especially of poor families and migrant children. And I think rather than trying to paint this as a picture of a race to the bottom, yes, we're already doing a little bit more than other councils. Hackney Council could also be a beacon in terms of childcare offering. German municipalities are in fact competing on childcare offering to get people to move there and for companies to set up shop. And I also have some work on how good childcare availability actually increases positively labor market outcomes and firm outcomes for local firms. So I think it would be great if we could set an example and say, we are paving the way, we're having affordable childcare, and this is how to keep our families here, how to keep fertility high, how to keep our schools engaged and our communities flourishing rather than having to move away.
Thank you very much. Members of the Commission, can you please indicate if you would like to come in with a question? I've got Councillor Sisarunga and then Councillor Binny Lubbock, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted very specifically to ask about children with SEND. I would like to know how the Council is working with providers to assist in early identification of SEND and to enable these children to be supported in local childcare and early years settings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lubbock.
Yeah, just reflecting on what the parents have just told us, the reduction of the number of bands seems to have quite a big impact, and it's obviously not as tapered as we'd like to see it. It feels like a jump of from 12% to 22% of someone's income is being spent on child costs when they just go over that limit of 55k income. Seems like quite a big jump, and as we've heard, might be putting some people off taking up places. So can that be considered or reflected upon?
So if I may, I think there's two separate distinctions here, which is one is the value of early years and good early years provision, and no one here disputes that. As a council, we have maintained more children's centres than any other London authority, I would say, and we're one of two that has continued to subsidise childcare in children's centres and in maintained settings. So we are one of the two local authorities in London that do that. So we are an outlier. I think Councillor Sizer will speak to the political lobbying, because I think there's two distinctions. There's the kind of national political picture and ambition, and what we as local authorities are funded to deliver. So we don't get any funding to subsidise childcare at all from central government at all. So that comes out of the council's general fund. And the general fund is applicable to every single department in the council. So that's about keeping our streets clean, it's about rubbish collection. So we have to take a very circumspect view about how we spend our money. But that does not detract from the fact that we value early years. And in terms of the outcomes we have in children's school readiness, we are one of the top performers in the country when you measure outcomes at primary school at SATS levels. And we just had another outstanding outturn from Hackney students and schools, and that's as a result of their school readiness. In terms of the Childcare Act 2006, this places a legal duty on local authorities to secure sufficient childcare as so far as reasonably practicable for working parents or parents who are studying or training for employment. In order to meet this duty, local authorities are required to undertake a detailed assessment of the supply and demand of childcare in this area. So in order to make comparisons possible between local authorities so we can benchmark, quorum sets the standard for what the sufficiency collection looks like. It's not something that's set locally. And it's a process that involves looking at all providers, because actually the number of children whose childcare is met through our children's centres is relatively small compared to the wider child population who are in receipt of early years in the borough. So the children's centres are a very small proportion of that. So the sufficiency report is how that is constructed. It comes from quorum, so we can benchmark with other authorities, and we can benchmark nationally. And the report we brought tonight is the survey that stems from that, so that we are not just relying every 2 years, so that we have a way of collecting information in the meantime, and we're not just, waiting by for the 2 years to pass. I just really wanted to make those distinctions very, very clear.
Councillor Sizer.
It was just to pick up on the lobbying piece and the reassurance that while we welcome the rollout of the entitlement, we realise that it comes with caveats. We realise that there's still repercussions in terms of sustainability of staffing. Nationally, it's one of the key issues is staff turnover and problems with recruitment. And we welcome the drives around that. But while we welcome the work that has been done and it has made a big difference for many people, we don't just sit back and accept that that's good enough. We, as a local council, are key in lobbying central government, and part of the local government association that are involved with lobbying as well. And we will keep pushing until there is, a further rollout. But at the moment, while we're grateful, we still will be part of that pushing forward campaigning voice as well.
Thank you very much. So I think I've got Councillor, brief follow-up, and others, please do put your hands up just in case.
So just a very brief follow-up. I don't think anyone is discounting that everyone who works in Hackney Education really values the childcare offer that we have, and that we value it to the point that we do subsidise it. I guess my question was the idea that we have a number of bands could that make it more accessible to more people if we had an extra band in there that didn't make the jump so drastic?
It's never easy making decisions about stopping doing things, and it's not something we take lightly. So what we really were keen to preserve is the support to the most vulnerable, to those who are least able to afford. And I think that by continuing that, it might actually make that more accessible to some other much lower income earners.
Thank you very much. We've also got Councillor Suso-Runga's question around children with special educational needs and disabilities.
Can I come in there, please? I just wanted to speak about the fact that we do have highly skilled practitioners who are able to identify need earlier, and we have a real focus on that in regards to right support, right time, and working with our SEND partners. The LES teams support the settings. We work collaboratively with our NHS partners, i.e. health, paediatricians, SALT. So actually our children within our early years settings are being identified quickly, and the right support is being put in at the right time, and working in collaboration with parents as well. And this is demonstrated by our outcomes of this academic year, or rather last academic year, apologies, where our children with EHC plans, their level of GLD increased from last year. So I think we are working hard in regards to supporting our SEN children, really understanding their need and putting the support in place appropriately. And that is across all of our settings, not just our children's centres, but our PVIs, our school-based settings, our playgroups, etc. all have equity in regards to the response from the SEN teams and the support that we give each of the settings. So regardless of where a child attends in the borough, they have that input. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say thank you. It's really important that we acknowledge early support. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sizer, please.
Just to reassure and to have a moment of pride in Hackney as well. We really are thinking outside the box as a borough. I attended one of the children's hubs, Best Start hubs, recently, who had Shelter come in, not just to talk about housing across the board, but actually special needs and housing. And I think the rollout of these kind of really innovative ways to reach out to various families that have children with special needs was really encouraging, and to hear the staff so proactively looking and finding ways outside the box to reach out to special needs gave me a huge sense of pride and encouragement that we're in good hands. There's much more to do, but I do think as a borough we are very creative and thinking outside the box with special needs.
Thank you, Councillor Sizer, because you know for some of us it's very personal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Gordon and then Councillor Troughton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd really like to thank the parent group for, I suppose, you know, really reminding all of us about the, you know, the really important, well, the multiple stresses on young families. I, you know, think a lot of the Commission members know that I'm half Danish, so my cousin works as an early years practitioner in Denmark, so I do know a bit about the, you know, different situations in other countries, and I really hope that's something that we can move towards here. So, you know, it can't be, as you've said more eloquently than I have, you know, it can't be overstated how important it is to support, you know, to support young families, you know, so that they, in all the different ways, so that parents who want to can stay and work, so that children, you know, have the right standards of education, and, you know, and the, you know, family support. And I think it's, however, I do think we have some really huge challenges here as a council, and sort of, you know, beyond, you know, beyond what can actually be decided sort of as a borough and in this chamber. So I just really, having said that, I absolutely share your aspiration in relation to that. And, you know, it's something that I think since my youngest is 21, so I think things have progressed, not fast enough, but they have progressed since then. And I really, really hope they will continue to progress. And I think it's really important that, you know, parents such as yourselves do say these things as often as possible, you know, in public forums, and remind us what it really should be like. However, I'm afraid getting back to what we can actually sort of achieve as a council and local authority, I would really like to know a bit more about the review of the provision of affordable childcare in Hackney, which dealt with some of these issues in 2024, making sort of a number of recommendations, just whether the officers can give us a bit of an update in relation to, you know, any work that's been done on that, or whether you wanted to come back on that.
In terms of the Affordable Childcare Commission, if I may, we haven't come prepared to answer those questions, so we will follow those up in writing, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Councillor Charlton, please.
Yeah, sorry, can I just, I did have another question really, just to sort of aid my understanding really. I mean, obviously there is, you know, the 30 hours free childcare isn't as comprehensive as I think almost everybody would like it to be. But I just really wondered whether there is any sort of barriers to parents claiming that, and what sort of support we've, you know, provided in childcare settings and as a council towards making sure that that's, you know, as many parents who are eligible can get access to that funding.
Can I just bring in Councillor Charlton, please?
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose in a similar vein to Councillor Gordon, really, how do we know which families are accessing, you know, our provision? And to, you know, although, you know, this is a borough, you know, that regardless of the demographic changes of recent years, you know, we still have high levels of economic and social need in the borough. So to what extent can we and do we provide for those in greatest need? And, you know, how do we manage and monitor that and you know, try and make that happen? Because I just think the point that, you know, our parent colleague over there made, you know, about outcomes and, you know, employability, you know, particularly for people who are coming to the country as refugees, you know, children that start school, you know, not without any English language, you know, are disadvantaged from the start, and their futures are as important as everyone else's, you know. So I just wonder how we accommodate, you know, those very varying levels of need, which is not to ignore the very important point that was made about, you know, the thresholds. I agree with Councillor Gordon. We need to keep this under review. You know, we don't want parents, you know, who are able now to, you know, pay for their childcare to feel that they have to give up jobs or move out of the borough in order to be able to, you know, afford to stay and work, or what, you know. Well, anyway.
So I think Simone will come in on some of the details in a second in regard to the work of the centres and how we track and make contact with people who are eligible for the funded places. In terms of the tracking of progress, as Simone made reference to GLD, which is a good level of development. So that's measured at the end of the early years stage when a child is 5, and we show good progress on GLD. And then, of course, the SATs is another indicator of that. And if we have an average of 46% of children on free school meals in our Hackney primary schools, and we're joint first in the country for our SATs results, which is just released last week, then in terms of the ambition and the assertiveness of the Hackney education team and the teams they support in our settings and in our schools, I think that speaks for itself. But we don't rest at thinking, you know, we're the best. It's always, how can we be better? So, you know, I'm really proud of the work that our schools, our students and our parents and our settings put into really pushing the development of children. And also just in terms of the outcomes for children who have EHC plans in Hackney, we're actually one of the best performers in the country. So when we identify need, actually the support we give children, and I know the SEND system is another conversation, and I know it's fraught with difficulties, and I know it's a nationally difficult system. And if we drill down to those children with the plans, actually, they do well in Hackney schools and in Hackney settings compared to their counterparts in other places in the country. But families who have no recourse to public funds, as the Children's Social Care Department, we have a team that supports those families, and we also fund placements for children who are in need, who are subject to child protection plans, who may be on special guardianship orders, living with relatives, so that we do fund the most vulnerable so that their childcare needs are met. And so we have a system of identifying those clearly through our children's social care networks. And Simone and the team might want to say something about some of the tracking and the support that's offered by the centres to identify children and encourage them to come to the settings. Thank you.
Yes, we have a service called the Family Information Service who run our social media in regards to pushing and advertising the entitlement. We were able to get a list of eligible families via the DWP, and those families who hadn't signed up within the fortnight deadline of the end of August were contacted directly via phone calls and emails if we had their email addresses. We have a daily phone line which is open, and we run face-to-face services as well in regards to parents being able to come in to get support in regards to locating appropriate childcare for their children. So we do have a really robust service. We also deliver information via the children's centres, i.e. leaflet drops, etc. And we're currently in conversation with our health partners in regards to what we could have in perhaps the red books, at €2 checks, etc., having leaflets, etc. there to support parents to fully understand what their entitlement is. So we're sure we're having a robust service there. And also children's centres also have a follow-up parent outreach in regards to supporting children within their locality.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Turbideloff and then Janine, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thanks very much, Simone and officers. It's really helpful to hear your report. And I really do feel very appreciative. I think it was Jackie that said that, you know, the council has managed to keep the cost low for low-income families. But I do remain concerned for families who earn over 55K. And so I would like perhaps the Commission to hear from officers if there has been an equality impact assessment or sort of socioeconomic assessment or what this big jump will mean for families, but especially for the borough. We already know, you know, the tremendous effect that we have experienced, our schools have experienced, because we haven't had sufficient children attending schools or rolling to schools. So I would imagine that this will have an effect definitely in the borough. So I would like to hear if you have considered that and what can you report to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Janine, please.
I feel like you must have been reading my mind, because I was going to ask about quality impact assessments and wanting to understand, I guess, the extent to which you've been able to get underneath any data from an intersectional perspective. I'm also keen to understand, and I think it's really great in terms of, you know, what services are being offered and trying to, you know, reach in as much as possible. But what isn't going well? What areas would you say need further development from your perspective? Because I guess the reality, and hearing, you know, from the parents today, thank you very much. I keep thinking about, well, who's kind of screened in and who's screened out, which families are we talking about and which ones are we not, and how are we assuring ourselves, and how can you provide assurance that we are thinking about those ones who are out of sight? So any reflections there would be great. Thank you.
Just to be clear, we didn't come necessarily prepared to for the Commissioner to talk about the fees and charges because it was the childcare survey that we came prepared for. But I have got officers who are in the meeting now who I'm just consulting with them to see if they can answer some of the questions that have just been posed.
Thank you.
Otherwise, we'll have to follow up in writing. I just want to check with the officer.
That's okay. I fully understand it. It's one of these areas where, you know, I think as the parents quite,
Yeah, I'll just speak to it very briefly and then we will follow up in writing. An equality impact assessment has been done. And also if you, I know we're not speaking about the fees and charges per se, but if you look at the frequently asked questions on our website, you will see that we have looked very carefully at the numbers in the affected bands. And we're very, you know, we're very understanding that there are people that are being affected by this, but our children's center managers are liaising directly with those families. It is a small group that are being really squeezed. We know that's impactful. No one's minimizing that, and we can follow up further. But I just want it to be understood that we have looked at that carefully, and our centers are in touch with those people.
thank you. I do appreciate the challenges because I think as the parents set out earlier on, we can all appreciate the interconnectedness of availability of childcare spaces, childcare sufficiency, and actually whether parents are in a position to actually take up those positions, and actually whether the childcare providers are actually even able to provide. We recognise that the cost of childcare is just one of many of the barriers that can obstruct people's families' ability to access these services. I mean, perhaps bringing it back specifically to this point around sufficiency and around the instruction of extended free childcare offer. I know that you've touched on this to some degree, Jason, but what do we know about the broader ecosystem of childcare provision in the borough, and the extent to which, in terms of, the cost specifically, and the extent to which the extended free childcare offer has been impacted by the varying costs of childcare across the borough? I do remember members of the Commission, I mean, it was a long time ago that we looked at this before we looked at the introduction of 30 hours, I think, for 3 and 4 year olds. So many of these themes are recurring themes that we were hearing the same thing about costs being bolted onto additional hours. So this isn't, I don't think this is new to the sector, arguably. It's just the extent to which it's impacting things is perhaps greater, but it would be interesting to understand what we understand about the broader costs of childcare locally and how that's impacted by the extended free childcare.
So just in terms of, just to be clear about your question, is it about the current take-up of the free entitlement?
Do we know, for example, as we've heard from parents, that we know that some childcare providers, they are upping the cost of the additional hours in order to meet the need? What do we know about the impact of that the extended free childcare offer has had potentially on the cost of childcare locally? We may not know that.
I think it's too early.
Okay.
It's very early days for us to be able to have any, concrete information on that.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I guess just going back to, some questions about the workforce. Could officers say anything about how the council is responding to what they know about kind of workforce challenges within local childcare sector? Is there a local training and support offer, and how is that being developed with local childcare providers? Thank you.
On that point, I'm going to add a follow-up, because again, I'm trying to remember now what this was that we looked at. I should know, but where we were talking about whether we could be really looking at our apprenticeship program and really thinking about how we could be meeting local needs. I think we've looked at this in terms of training people to become mental health practitioners, but actually, when we've got a borough where there's still quite a lot of people who are unemployed and looking for employment and looking for training. We've got a really successful apprenticeship scheme. To what extent are we trying to plug those gaps that we've identified, especially knowing that our children's centres in particular are such, good employers in the field?
I can touch a little bit on the national picture, which is that this is a national problem, and the government have done a big drive recently, especially in September. I think it's called something like Do Something Big, which was a big recruitment campaign specifically as well, looking at people that perhaps wouldn't normally go forward. Like there's not enough men as early years practitioners, so that was really positive, and I think we've been obviously part of that as well. I think we are in regular conversations with the children's centres as well to try and help with recruitment. I know our comms teams are often on this drive as well, but it's something we're definitely aware of. But unfortunately, it's not just Hackney. It really is a national picture, and one that I think the government are going to have to be addressing. Again, we'll add that to our list of things to lobby about.
If I could just come in on that quickly, and we definitely have supported the current government push about getting parents into the early years workforce by giving regular information to settings to pass on to families.
Thank you very much. I think Councillor Gordon.
I was going to ask about work.
Okay. Do members of the Commission
Can I add a point there? Is that at all? Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
My apologies. Just to say that we supported a meeting in regards to informing the settings regarding the apprenticeship programme and the benefits that they could have in regards to their settings and recruitment, etc. Many settings who attended that meeting were very interested, but much like I said in the update report, settings are cautious in regards to making such big changes before they see the impact of the entitlement from September for this term, in regards to the impact on their waiting lists, etc., etc. But settings are well informed. We regularly inform them via our early years updates, and as I say, we dedicated a large proportion of our summer professional network meeting to the apprenticeship programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other hands raised, and I get the sense that whilst this is a really critical point for parents and childcare providers, it's a really difficult point for us as a local authority to be making assessments and determinations about what's going to happen going forward, and what those, how local, parents and childcare providers are going to respond to the increase in entitlement. But I think that for us as a commission, especially after having looked at the item that we did previously, we understand, and also various different references to fees and charges, which has also been looked at not by this commission but by the council, that these things are all interconnected, and I think we need to keep an eye on them, and we need to, I know that we usually have childcare sufficiency updates annually, but I think that we need to ensure with the introduction of this extended offer that we maintain a close eye on developments in this space, because it has the potential to really shape, hopefully for the positive, what childcare provision looks like in our borough. So with that said, I think I'm going to bring this item to a close. I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us this evening and contributed towards both items. It's always a pleasure to have parents, and we're talking about your lives and your children's lives, and it's always important to have young people where possible, and parents and carers to share this space with us and to furnish our understanding of your experiences of our services, because ultimately that's what enables us to do our role as scrutineers as effectively as possible. So thank you very much, not just for your contributions today, but for your written submissions and your contributions to previous meetings and consultations. So thank you. And indeed, officers who have been tirelessly working on childcare sufficiency and consultations, and as you mentioned, Jackie, enabling us to be the outlier, you know, one of two local authorities in London that have a thriving children's centre offer that all of us, I think, here today want to see continue. I'm a parent of a child who went to a children's centre nursery. I know that there are others here, so I think we're all committed to doing what we can to ensure that that is the case, and championing the cause to the powers that be to ensure that our efforts as a local authority are supported to that effect. So thank you, everybody. I'll now be moving on to, you're probably free to leave now, because I'm now going on to more of the general commission stuff. So thanks once again. Thank you, thank you. So moving on now to item 6, which is behaviour management and school inclusion. So the Commission completed its formal public evidence gathering at its most recent meeting in July, and is now embarking on the engagement of local stakeholders, school leaders, parents, and of course children and young people. A brief summary is being prepared of the key evidence the Commission has received to date, together with possible outline recommendations, which will be informally shared with the Commission to inform the progress of the review. The scrutiny officer can take members through an outline of the planned areas of consultation over the next 6 to 8 weeks. They include the public call for evidence and focus groups with key stakeholders.
So just to say, we're about to, we've completed our public evidence gathering session. We'll do a briefing on what the emerging kind of conclusions from that so far are, just to kind of pause and reflect. We're now moving to engage with our local stakeholders. This will be started off with a public call for evidence, and we'll be looking to engage our school leaders, our parents, and our young people. So that will primarily, the public call for evidence might primarily be a way to also to engage our stakeholders and to facilitate them into more qualitative data collections. We'll be writing to all our schools to notify them of the public call for evidence and what we intend to gain from and understand from our review, and to invite them to participate in planned focus groups. I'll be in contact with everyone around possible dates for focus groups and when the consultation, the public call for evidence goes live, so then we can plan our subsequent focus groups with parents and with school leaders. We'll be doing a separate kind of focus group line of engagement with young people through Hackney Youth Parliament and other youth groups to reach that. We'll try and mix it up so we can get as many of our Commission members to those focus groups, so you can have here a range of those different ranges of evidence across parents, head teachers, and our young people. So we notifying those dates as soon as we get those confirmed.
Got a couple of hands up. 3 hands, please. Deputy Mayor Bramble first. Councillor. Oh, 4, okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just thought it might be a good opportunity to remind scrutiny that we're out doing our education strategy consultation, and one of the big parts of that is touching on HEALS, which is Hackney's additional learning service, education learning service, or additional or alternative service. And this speaks to the heart of Councillor Cicerone's point about scrutiny, where we brought that early inception thinking here before it was fully developed or launched, because we value the role of scrutiny. And as time goes on and we have complicated scenarios to consider, I think scrutiny is critical and remains at the heart of all that we do there. And the point of HEALS, as you know, it's how we reimagine inclusions to reduce exclusions, and looking at the outreach. And a big part of what Jason and I have been doing is thinking about how we work with community groups and the voluntary sector, and strengthening that work going forward. Jackie mentioned that we are doing really well in our SATs. We're joint first in the country for our SATs results. I'm really proud of our children and young people. I think that's a phenomenal task. Jason and I were talking about our roles in education, and for me, when I taught, it was pre-COVID. So the context in the classroom is very different now. And I mention that because that's on the back of great A-level results for our young people, great GCSE results, Why is that context important? Because I feel we've got some of the strongest school leaders in the country to work with us proactively to really push the dial on those disproportionate outcomes that none of us want to see for our children and young people. And Jason and I and Councillor Sizer in her role as SEN lead are really working now with the school sector and head teachers that are champions and leading this area to really think about how we can improve the sector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Brumbaugh. Councillor Suso Rungo, I think you had your hand up as well. And then I've got Jason and then Councillor Turbot de Law.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we really appreciate all the work that Scrutiny, that the senior officers and the Cabinet do around this really important issue. And it was wonderful to have Hackney Quest, Immediate Theatre and the Crib in here the last meeting. But we have to make sure we capture all those people out there in the community, which I know you will do. And also just to stress the importance of how timely this is, because every day someone is going to school, they are subject to school behaviour policies. And although we respect the fact that we have to have them, we also know that some of them need to change. So for our young people, can we make sure that whatever we do in terms of forums and engagement, that it is timely? And I know that you will do that, so thank you.
I forgot to mention that actually Jason and I are going to be doing a meeting with parents around HEALS on that, in that exact thing. So parents will have the opportunity in that forum to have that dialogue. We're doing a lot of work with the voluntary sector who are very close to our children and young people, so their voices are getting elevated in this space. As I said, where we are outliers in the country, second in the country nationally out of 182 local authorities in terms of improving outcomes for disadvantaged children, means that we are in a strong position to make sure that we do better in those negative or disproportionate outcomes that none of us want to see, whether it's black boys, children with SEND, any additional needs, all of those things we want to work together to improve. And we're not complacent. I think Jackie said that before, we're not complacent. We are fantastic educators, but we want to be excellent in every parameter. And that is why we're working really hard to make sure we drive down those disproportionate outcomes that none of us want to see. Thank you for your grace on that, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can see we've got another hand. And just to note that this was not an item to discuss. And I was hoping, look, unusually, we're like on time. We could have finished early. I've got this bad reputation for finishing late. So let me try and finish early tonight and give you some time back this evening. I'm going to take a couple more comments, but this item was really just about setting out what's happening. So if we can bear that in mind with our contributions, please. So I've got Jason and then Councillor Turbot-Doloff and then Councillor Sizer, please.
Yeah, just a point and then a question as to what's happening, but just back to the point. I think Deputy Mayor Bramble reminded everyone well that we are working through this process, which we're calling HEALS, which is about ensuring that the systemic gaps in terms of support for children, their families and schools are put in place. And sorry to say this again, but just a reminder, the council does not have say over individual school behavior policies, but what we want to do is provide support. And we've said many times in the chamber that as part of that, we intend to offer advice. And I know you're undertaking your work. My question, I know Martin just outlined the process. Do we have any idea in terms of timings on that process, just to be mindful of the work that we're doing this year in terms of rolling this out on the school calendar as well? Thank you.
So the planned call for evidence will happen towards the end of September, beginning of October.
Thank you. Councillor Turbot-Doloff, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. It's really amazing to hear the news about the students, top in the country. Really well done to everyone involved and our wonderful young people. I just wanted to comment on the work that the Commission is doing in regards to school exclusion and behaviour policies, because we have also become top in inner and outer London with the highest level of exclusions. So I really look forward to was coming, and I just wanted to commend the work the Commission is doing. I have a lot of hopes in it, and I'm really, really pleased to hear and see that we have moved now to accepting we have a problem with the school exclusions, and I'm really looking forward to all the outcome. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sizer, please.
Actually, I don't think anyone's ever denied there's been an issue with the data. I think you can go on record and see me speaking in this very chamber. And in fact, sometimes I have said, talk more about disproportionate outcomes for Black children. Don't just talk about exclusion. What about disproportionate outcomes? So I don't think anyone in the chamber has ever said, recognising a problem. We've always said that the high level of exclusions is something that none of us want to see, and we want to drive it down. So just want to reiterate, we're all in the same place with you, Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sizer.
Yeah, just hopefully another nice flying the flag for Hackney thing. I attended a roundtable in Westminster today about school exclusions. It's very much on the national picture. New Minister Georgia Gold was there and was listening to everything that a very packed room was talking about. So I would encourage everyone, if they're interested in this topic, which we all are, to follow the work of The Difference nationally. And this is an ongoing piece of work, and one that we're very much involved with and helping drive. So watch this space, but again, part of a bigger picture than just Hackney, which is great.
Thank you very much. I think the main thing I wanted to say to Commission members is just to help as much as you can to get as many people as possible to engage with the call to evidence, really. I think any school leaders that you know, any of you who are, governors at schools, really do try to get those that you know who work in schools. We really want to hear from schools. We really want to hear about what they think is working well, what they think the challenges are. And we really want to, I think just even thinking back to the previous item or the item before that about consultation, and about often one of the biggest challenges with consultations is that you don't hear from enough people, or sometimes you hear from enough people, but you don't hear from the range of people that you need to hear from in order to really furnish your understanding of a particular topic. So what is really critical for us in relation to this is that we're able to hear from as many people as possible. So those of you who have got sort of different community organisations, as Councillor Sissoho-Orunga mentioned, those who, Hackney Quest and the Crib, and those who attended our previous meeting, please do try to get as many people to sort of feed into this as possible. I'm now going to move on to item 7, which is the work programme. The work programme for the remainder of the municipal year is contained within the agenda pack, with the exception of a small number of items. These have been scoped and confirmed. The scrutiny officer can take members through the relevant updates for the work programme.
It's just self-explanatory there. The green ones are all those confirmed. The amber ones are ones we need to kind of finalise and confirm. So there's just one thing on our last meeting in March 16th, really, just where we really need to kind of work on agreeing that scope and outcome post-16 education and training. And we've met with Head of the Employment Service and our colleagues in the Skills Economy and Growth Commission as well, to link up with them on this item as well. But to say that that's more or less our work programme, and I'm confirmed for the rest of the year.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to item 8, which is minutes. The minutes of the last meeting held on July 22nd, 2025 are attached for members to note and agree, and members agree the minutes. Thank you very much. AOB, we don't have any other than the next meeting is the 13th of October, 2025. Thank you very much.